Salam alaikum, alaikum salam. This is Tata Matamba. I'm doing this video to answer a question that was left down in the comments. They were asking about what happened to my stepfather and how that brujeria, right, affected him. I'm not gonna go so much in depth with what happened to him, or who threw that to him, or who gave him that negative medicine. But I will elaborate on the fact of how us priests, right, how we affect Kuinseki, the physical realm, how we affect the physical realm positively and negatively, depending on the ensara, right, on the ensara that we're doing, or that bilongo, or that medicine that we're gonna do. It can be caused for positive or for negative. So there's three things that we do, right, that we affect Kuinseki. One is the physical body. We're gonna start with positive, right? In a positive way, how do we affect the body? Depending on the ensara. If we have a patient or somebody come to us, or even a family member who has diabetes or has a cancer, a tumor, we physically, the disease is physically there in their body, and it could have been caused by a natural process of life, right? Things that are natural because of their genes or their decisions, or to things that they ate, or the actual genes. Most of the time has to do with genes. A way that we cure that and that ensara is going to be physically, right? We can introduce something like certain chambas or certain teas that they'll consume, or initiation sometimes, because they're that infumbe, or that spirit will get something called manga, and I'm not going to go so much in depth with that, and they'll understand the biogenetics of that person, and it can code or decode those negative things in there. But most of the time it's going to be done by physically cause, to stop that process. They'll consume something, Now the second way we can do it is, cause and effect outside. We don't put it in their food, or they don't consume it. Positively, right? Positively, we can do certain things, like you might see them get clean with animals, or certain herbs, or certain empolos, or amulets. There's many things to stop certain processes, or to take off certain things off their aura, or things that are attached to them in a spiritual way, right? They had depression or couldn't sleep, now they're able to sleep, and these type of things. And most of the time that has to do more with the spirit, or the mind, in that sense. And then the third way of doing something positively, right, is in a secondary mean, and this is a little bit more advanced. This has to do with those scrolls of time, and I'm not gonna go such in depth with that, but we'll do a certain ensara to affect things in the future, right, in the timeline for that person, so luck is on their side, so they can obtain a job, or have luck, or stop a car accident, or prevent an issue, or a problem in the future. So we'll literally change path, they'll change paths in that way. These are all positive ways that we have effect. Now for negative, physically, right, this is what they did to my stepfather. They make certain ensadas, and they'll put it in foods, or a way for the person to consume it, so it can physically affect the person, cause cancers, tumors, or rashes, or aches, fevers, things like that. And it's a spirit, obviously. It's a spirit that the person consumed. So that's one way. The second way is they'll throw it, right? They'll throw it around the person and its aura, or where the person's gonna pass by, so that spirit can latch on or catch on that person, and it can cause other effects like anger, emotional issues, schizophrenia, psychosis, many different ways negatively. It can insomnia, many things, many things. Now, the third way, right, which is a little bit more advanced and a negative way to affect things in a secondary means or affect things within the future, is to cause a car accident, to cause, you know, things through a secondary mean, make the boss get angry and fire him. In that sense, things are done in the future and the person's gonna make their decisions and catch the timeline, and then that event happens. It's not so much in the moment, kind of like when you consume the medicine and the spirit is there in that moment, you know, healing the person or causing harm to the person. If not, he's waiting, or it's there waiting for a certain event to happen. And that's why we do divination most of the time, right? That's why they do a lot of divination to make sure that in the future negative things are not there, or ways that we can change that. So hopefully, you know, that answered that question. You know, Palo Mayombe is very deep. You need your godfather. You need somebody to teach you these things. You cannot read this in books or any of that. I'm gonna speak a little bit about also, you know, the Inkisis, right? That's another question that was down there. Instead of making 2 videos, you know, I'm gonna kill 2 birds with 1 stone, how they say. They were speaking about the Inkisis and how they're constructed. I can't go in depth with how the Inkisis are constructed in that sense, especially not through here and not even to anybody. You know, that's very secretive within each household. But what I can say is that every house has its own way. You know, every house, every linaje has its own way of doing things. And, you know, Briumba, Mayombe, la regla Shamalonga, lo Brahma con Brahma, lo Changani, lo Kimbisa, lo Santo Cristo en Viaje. You know, all those branches practice the tradition differently. But most of the time, all of us, all the branches have certain concepts that are the same. And you're not going to understand that unless you know, you have a godfather and he teaches you. They'll sit there and teach you about that. So when it comes down to the Inkisis, right, all those branches, all those lineages, right, all of us have 5 things that we use, outside of the partial, right, outside of where you introduce the Infumbe. And what I mean by Infumbe, we'll get into that. The spirit, right? The partial can be made out of anything. It can be made out of wood, a pot, brass, clay, a sack. It doesn't matter. It can be in a pumpkin. It can be in anything. In a bottle. It really doesn't matter. It's just somewhere where something's going to be introduced, where it's going to live in. A container. Think of it like that. A futu, a parcel. Outside of that, you know, outside of that, there's 5 things. One is Patipemba, which is those spiritual sigils. Every house has its own, every tata has its own way of doing things with the sigils. But everybody uses Patipembas. Differently, but we all use them, same concept. The next thing, right, is the Infumbe, or Infumbi, or Ndundu, right, the spirit. I'm not speaking the actual Kriumba, and I'm not going to say that through here. What Kriumba or Inketo, what are these things? Or Infumba and Polo, you know, all of these things, we all use Infumbe or Infumbi, right? We all use that, a spirit. But some of us might use Kriumba, some of us might use Inketo, some of us might use Infumba and Polo, some of us might use Matari, some of us might use other things, roots and this and that. Every house has its own way of doing things, and every lineage has its own way of doing things. The next thing is Insinga Dikanda. The third thing is Insinga Dikanda. In Cuba, they say that el gajo, el gajo, ese linaje, the lineage, right? Which it comes to be the actual lineage, right? Insinga Dikanda. Everybody has an Insinga Dikanda. Things are not just made. Like, they just don't wake up and you're going to put all things together and run it. No. It's not like that. You know, your godfather teaches you the same way. Your godfathers in Kisi teach your in Kisi, in that sense. And there's many different ways. And I'm not gonna go in depth because I just heard something. I'm not gonna go so much in depth of, you know, how we do in Singatikanda. You know, there's multiple ways of doing it. The fourth way is Mpungo or in Kisi, right? The Mpungo, there's a helicopter passing by. Give me a second. Excuse me, and I also have a cigar. The Mpungo or in Kisi is, in Cuba, that's what they call the Mpungo, that ancestral force. It gets trapped. That's what we get, and we trap it. And we introduce that to the Mfumbe. If it's gonna be an Nsasi, we use Matari Nsasi, right? We obtain that. If it's gonna be a Centella, you grab certain things and you introduce that to the Mfumbe. If it's gonna be a Kowayende, they grab certain forces from nature, right? And they introduce that to the Mfumbe. If it's gonna be a Cholawenge, you grab certain forces from nature and you introduce that to the Mfumbe, and that's what makes it Cholawenge. If it's gonna be Kalunga, they grab certain forces from nature and they introduce it to that Mfumbe to make it a Kalunga. You know, every house has its own way of doing things, you know, and the most important thing is the Nsinga Dikanda. And then the fifth thing is the Bilongo. What I mean by Bilongo, the dirts, the sticks, the bugs, all that other stuff, right? The birds and the animals, all the stuff that goes into it also. And the process, there's a process of doing all these things. So it's not just grab all this stuff and put it in there. You know, it's not like that, no. All I can say is, you know, take these things serious because these things are real. You know, that's all I can say. These things are real. You should not go into a house having faith. That we don't have faith here in Palo, Mayombe. We don't have, at least for where I come from. Faith is out the door. Belief, no. These things you come here to know. These things are real. The same way you wake up in the morning, you go to work and you do things. You know, it's as real as that. It's extremely real. You get to see them, you get to hear them, you get to experience the tradition and the practice and the spiritual world. These things are real. Now, I'm gonna give you guys another advice that, you know, before I hang this up. If you obtain an Nkisi or you're practicing the tradition, and I gotta watch myself closely of what I say. There's something called Kala Yesima, right? Or to shift perspectives, to turn on and to turn off a certain perspective. If you get initiated in this practice, I highly advise you to distinguish, right? Distinguish both practices. I'm Tata Matamba, but you know, outside of me practicing this tradition, I have a whole life. My name is, let's just say, John Doe. I'm not Tata Matamba 24 hours a day. You know, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a brother, you know, I'm a father, and I have to live that process. I have to shut off Tata Matamba, and I have to live that process. Things are done at the right time. Everything has a right time to be done. You know, if you're going to school or if you're at work, you should not be thinking about, you know, these spiritual things such in depth, unless this is your job, right? Unless this is what you do 24 hours a day. You know, if you're doing that, then yes. But you have to be very careful, you know, because these things are real. So you have to separate these two worlds tremendously. When I go in that little room, when I put on my hat, I'm Tata Matamba. I shift perspectives. I can come out to nature and see it, and see the spirits and understand things differently than when I'm John Doe, a husband, you know, I'm in my job, or I'm being a father, I shift that perspective, you know, because if not, you can't function. You can't live the process of life, of being born, you know, growing older, you know, going to your high school, going to college, getting a job, marrying, all of these things that come through life. You have to learn how to kala yesima, turn on and turn off these perspectives, these things. And it's very important because you're going to see, I see many of you guys, and I have people also come to me that they don't know how to turn that off. They're 24/7 on. And it has happened to me. It has happened to me too. But you need to have somebody there, your godfather or somebody who understands that, hey, you're going too fast. You know, you are thinking about this too much. Because if not, you know, you'll lose yourself in it. You'll lose yourself in the tradition and in the practice, and especially in Palo. And you'll go crazy. That's why many people go crazy in this tradition, because they don't take this serious. And next thing you know, negative things are happening in their life. Next thing you know, they got sicknesses. Next thing you know, they died at an early age, or their children or their family members around them. And they'll blame it on the Nkisi. They'll blame it on the practice, and it's not like that. It's not like that. I'm gonna go ahead and leave you guys with Insinga Dikana Ninga Katu Bukako. Always uphold the tradition. Always make the right decisions for the tradition. Thank you guys for your time. Like, share, subscribe. If you have any questions, leave it down in the comments. Thank you guys for your time, man. Salam alaikum, alaikum salam.